Living Seed Media brings to you God's Word, which is His comprehensive equipment for changing lives. May the Lord impact your heart as you encounter His Word. For further inquiry or counsel, contact Peace House, P.O. Box 971, Boko, Benue State, Nigeria. Telephone numbers 0703 0363659, 0703 7681198. Email address lsmedia@livingseed.org, or visit our website at www.livingseed.org. Let us sit back and listen as the servant of God brings forth the word of life.
This is a seminar, and when our brother was here, I thought he was preaching, so that when I come, I'll say, this one is not preaching, this one is a class, it's a seminar. But he told us what he did was also a class. So we are into another class this morning, and the topic for this class is constructionist theory of learning. God has challenged us, and He wants to give us the instrument by which we'll go back and do the work. And there's a theory of learning that God wants to equip us with. So as we go back to our classrooms, we employ it to make the youth what God would want them to be. So again, our topic is Constructivist theory of learning. Can we all say it together? After I have said it. Constructivist theory of learning. It is also called Constructivism. Let's say Constructivism. So in this session, I have an outline that indicates that we're going to be doing essentially 6 things together. Number 1, I'll tell you the objectives for this session. The topic is Constructivism. What is our objective in looking at this theory? Number 2, we're looking at the rationale. What's the rationale for this theory? Number 3, the origin of constructivist theory of learning. Then number 4 is the theory itself. And when we focus on the theory, we'll be looking at constructivist concept of knowledge. Constructivist, what is their view of knowledge? What is their view of learning? And then number 5, we will then look at implications of this theory both for the learner and the teacher, and then we'll conclude our discussion. Now, I told you the first thing we are doing is the objective. And I have 3 objectives here. Objective number 1, while we are looking at constructivist theory of learning, number 1 is that we may have a sound understanding of what it means. It's a theory that we may have a sound understanding of what it means. Number 2, that we may know what this theory is telling us that is new and relevant. And then number 3 objective is that when we would have known objective 1 and 2, we'll be able to apply it to learning. And this is where, please, I would like to engage you. The essence of looking at this theory is that when we break up in our workshop groups into our subject disciplines, we will actually practically discuss how we may apply this theory to learning. And so my counsel this morning is, please pick paper and pen, and whatever you hear, just write it. You may not hear everything. You may not understand everything. But the person next to you in your subject discipline may hear what you didn't hear and understand what you didn't understand. So when you go back to your groups and you start to discuss, you'll be able to compare notes. So the essence is that we may apply it. That's the objective. We have finished number 1 thing we have set out to do. The number 2 thing we want to do is, what's the rationale for looking at this theory? Why are we looking at this theory? We are looking at it because what a teacher believes about learning affects his expectations on learning outcomes. What a teacher believes learning is very important because it affects all that he does in the classroom. His expectations and the learning outcomes. What a teacher sees about learning guides him or her to make decisions about desirable means of implementing and assessing instruction. And if we must not enter our classrooms blind to what we want to achieve, that we may perform what is correct, what we desire, we must have a belief about teaching. What is teaching? What do we expect from teaching? It is important. And that is where I'm excited about what we're doing here. And what is my excitement? It is that Nigeria, as a nation of over 50 years, we don't have a national ideology. 50 years of independence, we've not been able to define ourselves as a nation. So we don't know who we are and where we are going to. And that is already a tragedy. But then, for us, it again has implications for learning. Because if Nigeria has not, if as a nation we have not defined ourselves, is it possible that we can define what is happening in our classrooms? Is it possible? So we are entering our classrooms blind to what we want. And if we didn't know what we wanted to achieve from the beginning, is there any chance that we'll achieve it? And that is why I'm excited. Because in this meeting, we will give a future to this country. In this meeting, we are giving a future to Nigeria. And that is how are we giving a future to this country? We are here by God's grace defining education, defining learning, and what the thrust of our learning ought to be. And if we heard, these were the instructions. God is telling us in specific terms. These are things that people in the leadership of this country do not know. Because if they knew, they wouldn't play with education. Let me give an instance to indicate how that these things, we don't know them. God in his mercy has hid them from leadership. It has pleased him to reveal them to us. UNESCO, which is a human organization, sees and knows the importance of education. And so they have recommended that 26% of national budgets should go to education. 26%. But in our country, this year, the budget, what's the percentage that has gone to education? Does anybody know? 6%. Yes. And it's one of the highest. UNESCO, a human organization, says if you are spending less than 26% of your national budget on education, you have not started it. Don't dream about development. You are not there. In the 21st century, we are talking of modernization, we are talking of civilization, and we have only 6%. That shows you where we are. So we are doing number 3 thing now, which is what? This is a class. I gave you objectives. I gave you an outline. Did I? Thank you very much. Thanks for your response. I gave you an outline. There are 6 items, right? And it will also guide us in the use of our time. What was number 1 thing we set out to do? We have an objective for this session, for looking at this particular theory. What is number 2? What is the second thing? Rationale. Why is it important for us to look at this theory? And number 3, we are looking at the origin of a theory that we are considering this morning. And what is that theory? Constructivism. And the origin, just by way of summary, the term constructivism is derived from Jean Piaget's reference to his views as constructivists, from Jean Piaget. These are names you have heard. It also derives from Bruner's description of discovery learning as constructivist. You've heard of Jean Piaget, you have heard of Bruner. Even if you didn't, you have heard of discovery learning. This is the beginning of this theory of constructivism. As you go into literature, just so that you wouldn't be confused, this constructivist theory has been defined using other terms. Even here, I told you is constructivist theory of learning. We refer to it as constructivism. Other terms used in describing it are generative learning. So if you go back doing what we've been encouraged here to do, to study, to read, if you find a theory and it's talking about generative learning, it is talking about constructivism. Another name used for it is saturated learning. It is also called authentic learning, or rather authentic instruction. Another name for it is postmodern curricula. And it's also referred to as educational semiotic. Now let us go to the meat of our discourse this morning. We are looking at constructivism. Constructivism. And I told you that this is our emphasis. Our discourse, our discussion on this theory will center on how it views knowledge and how it views learning. When we would have considered that, then the application part of it will be, how does the learner use this theory? How does it apply to the learner? That's the learning process. How does the teacher use it? So, according to Constructivists, now we are into what Constructivism, how it views knowledge. And remember, if it is Constructivism we want to use in our classrooms, then we must be diligent to know what it says about knowledge and about learning, about the teacher, about the learner. But the first thing we're starting with is how Constructivism looks at knowledge. And this is not a paper I'm presenting. I've done literature review, and I'm giving you nuggets on this theory. So can we start? Are we together? Now, constructivist theory. What does it tell us about knowledge? The first thing constructivism is telling us is that it is not a theory of teaching. It is a theory of learning. Meaning, the emphasis in constructivism is learning the learner rather than teaching the teacher. It's not about the teacher and teaching. Primarily, it is about learning and the learner. It is a theory about knowledge and learning. And how does the theory define knowledge? It defines knowledge as temporary. It defines knowledge as developmental. It defines knowledge as socially and culturally mediated and thus non-objective. According to this theory, knowledge, no matter how it will be defined, is in the heads of persons. Remember we said it's a theory of learning. The focus of this theory is the learner. And so it says, knowledge is in the heads of persons, and that the thinking subject has no alternative but to construct what he or she knows on the basis of his or her own experience. That the learner constructs knowledge. Knowledge is not imposed on the learner. The learner constructs knowledge on the basis of his or her own experience. This theory assumes that learners have to construct their own knowledge individually and collectively. That each learner has a toolkit. Every learner that comes to the classroom has a toolkit of concepts and skills with which he or she must construct knowledge to solve problems presented by the environment. That the role of the community. So if the learner is coming to the class with a kit of concepts and skills to construct his own knowledge, the role of the community then, the role of other learners and the teacher is to provide the setting, to pose the challenges and offer the support that will encourage mathematical construction. The learner is coming into classroom with an experience that enables him or her to learn, if the others will grant him or her support. Constructivism holds that language users must individually construct the meaning of words, phrases, sentences, and texts. And so, the central principles of this approach are that learners can only make sense of new situations in terms of their existing understanding. That learning involves an active process in which learners construct meaning by linking new ideas with their existing knowledge. Constructivists of whatever persuasions, and there are many schools of this same constructivism, they have other persuasions, but all of them are persuaded on one thing: a commitment to the idea that development of understanding requires active engagement on the part of the learner. Always saying is that constructivism as a theory emphasizes the learner. Are we together? Are we together? Oh, I'm fast. But even if I'm fast, the summary so far, and remember, even if I'm very fast, you don't need to bother, because that's why I say catch what you can catch. What you didn't catch, another person will catch, all right? So when we go to our workshop sessions, what you didn't catch, another person would have caught. An understanding you miss, another person gets. So when we compare notes, we fix the pieces together. But the summary of all we are saying so far is that constructivism as a theory emphasizes who? The learner. Thank you very much. Clap for yourselves. And the theory is saying, but let me ask, because somebody may be offended at what I said earlier on, that as a nation we do not seem to have an ideology. There's nothing that defines us. We don't have core values. And this percolates into whose system. We don't really know what understanding we have about learning, about what transpires in the classroom. So for constructivism, they know what ought to happen in the classroom. And what should happen in the classroom, the learner is the focus. That that the learner comes to the learning environment with skills, with concepts, with experiences, with understanding, ready to learn. And that all that teachers and fellow students are doing, and the community, to facilitate learning is to give support to the learner. Is that what you have said? Is that what we said? So let me ask now. In our classrooms, what is the emphasis now? Can somebody answer? I can't hear you. Teacher? Is it learner-centered? Okay, those who say the focus in our classrooms now is learner-centered, put up your hand, let's see you. Okay, down. Those who say it's teacher-centered, put up your hand. Some are neither here nor there. Let me ask a third variant. Many of us are teaching the way we were taught. True or false? True or false? So if you are teaching in your classroom the way you were taught, that your class teacher taught you, put up your hand. Okay. But at least we are understanding constructivism. So like I told you earlier on, the first thing we are looking at is constructivist view of learning, or knowledge rather, knowledge. And I told you, even if I'll try to be slow, but I earlier on told you, just to relax you, that what I have done is not a paper. I have not written. It's literature review. And that's why you must have observed that I've already repeated myself a lot. Have I not? I'm repeating myself. And I don't think it's wrong. It's for emphasis, because it's a review. So you mustn't get everything. It's just one thing we've been saying all along. Can I continue with constructivist view of knowledge? Okay. Constructivists believe that the human mind can know only what the human mind has made. The human mind can only know what the human mind has made. In that all knowledge is tied to action. They believe that knowing an object or an event is to use it by assimilating it into an action scheme. I am knowing something new because what has been presented to me is integrated into my scheme. The issue of emphasizing experience of the learner in learning. They believe that knowledge construction takes place when new knowledge is actively assimilated and accommodated into existing knowledge. They believe that our understanding of reality are constantly being revised and reconstructed through time and with respect to exposure to new experiences. Experiences are the raw material of learning, of knowledge. According to this theory, in order for understanding to take place, teachers must not only elicit students' prior concepts, but must also build on these concepts during instruction. That new knowledge must be predicated, must be hinged on old knowledge and experience. According to this theory, the learner must first be dissatisfied with the current conception, and that it is this dissatisfaction arising from cognitive conflict that drives the learner to consider alternative conceptual views. So for learning to take place, I'm coming with experiences, with concepts, and with a toolkit for learning. Then the situation I meet on ground creates confusion. And that's what makes learning to take place in order to resolve this conflict. So learning is about cognitive equilibrium. I have an experience, but the experience I have does not match what I'm seeing on ground. So there is conflict. So what is happening? And in order to resolve this conflict, in order to attain cognitive equilibrium, I try to sort out the discrepancy between what I have already known and this new thing that I'm experiencing. And when I have resolved this, there is a cognitive equilibrium, which means I attain a higher level of learning. So, according to Constructivists, that's all that we do in learning, trying to resolve cognitive conflicts. My experience does not seem to match what is happening in the classroom. So I desire, I have a conflict, and I am active. It is my problem. And so I try to resolve the cognitive conflict. Am I making sense? Are we together? So the issue of emphasizing the learner's experience, that it is actually the experience of the learner, where he's coming from, that makes him want to learn. And part of what the learner wants to learn is that the experience is coming with, maybe from home or from wherever, does not seem to agree with what is there on ground. So he's confused. He wants to know what has created this conflict. And by the time other learners and the teacher help him, he solves the problem. We are still continuing with this theory's conception of knowledge, that learners construct knowledge for themselves. That's all we've been saying. Each learner individually and socially constructing meaning as he or she learns. According to this theory, constructing meaning is actually what learning is all about. And there is, according to this theory, there is no other kind of learning than that the learner is constructing meaning out of what he is saying, meaning based on his experience and exposure. This theory believes that there is nothing that is called knowledge out there. That knowledge resides with the teacher and is coming to impose on the learner. No. They say there is nothing like knowledge out there, independent of the knower. There's only knowledge as we construct for ourselves as we learn. So according to this theory, learning is not understanding the true nature of things. It is not remembering duly perceived perfect ideas. It is a personal and social construction of meaning out of the bewildering array of sensations which we have no order or structure which we fabricate on. Knowledge is a personal and social construction of meaning. And it happens when we have sensations. That each learner has his or her own model to explain nature. So learning comes about only as the learner interacts with sensory data. Sensory data, what you see, what you hear, what you touch. It is by interacting with this sensory data that knowledge is constructed. So according to this theory, the learning process of knowledge is also the construction process of knowledge. And that students are the main body of learning activity. So students construct knowledge on their own initiative. And so, what then is the role of teachers? They are helpers. They are drivers of students so they can construct knowledge. Knowledge is only an explanation that the learners are giving for their experience. That knowledge is an assumption, but not the final answer to all questions. That knowledge is constructed, and that it can be discarded along with the human process and new assumptions appear. So learning is a process. According to this theory, let me begin to jump, because we have gone over half an hour and we're just looking at their view of knowledge. So let's jump. According to this theory, language and signals endow learning with certain forms. This does not mean that learners have the same understanding of these statements, even if they speak the same language. And that 100 people will have 100 understanding of the same concept, even if they speak the same language. These understandings are based on each learner's experience and background, which is determined by specific learning experiences. According to this theory, learners' conception of knowledge is derived from a meaning-making match. Knowledge comes about when I'm trying to make meaning out of what I see. Which is to say also that knowledge is an understanding retained in the mind of an individual from experience, reasoning, and imagination. And this comes when individuals examine what is before them, when they question, when they analyze facts and their experiences. So apart from the fact that individuals construct meaning, this theory also believes that knowledge can be shared. And so they have what is called distributed cognition. And that is to say that individuals can share meanings. And so, it makes us into a meaning-making community. According to this theory, reality is socially constructed, constituted only through language, and organized and maintained through narrative. So far, two issues we've looked at in the view of knowledge. That the individual constructs knowledge. But then there is a little shift that allows the individual to again construct knowledge within a community context. So there are shared meanings. Now let's go to the view of learning. How do constructivists view learning? Am I still too fast? Are we together? Are we going somewhere? Now, well, we are, so far, we're not talking much about the teacher, the learner constructing knowledge. But very soon, we shall also look at the role of the teacher. And I think that's where we may have something to start to go to discuss in our workshop groups. Views about learning. It says individuals construct their cognitive structures. That construction is a kind of initiative, conscious and self-organized. That learning is actually an interaction between the subject and the object. And that the learning process is a construction of knowledge. It is an individual construction and the generation of meanings. That learning is completed by the interaction of learners' old and new knowledge. So as far as this theory is concerned, pure external stimulation is useless. Whatever stimuli, whatever stimulus you are bringing from outside the individual, whether it's coming from the teacher or from wherever, is meaningless, except it comes from within the individual. that it is only when learners code, process, and construct their unique understandings based on previous experience can it be real learning. So what is real learning? When learners code, when they process and construct their unique understandings based on their previous experience. That is what learning is about. So as far as this theory is concerned, the critical action of constructive meaning is mental. That learning is in the head. It is a mental activity. It happens in the mind. All we needed to do was to provide activities that engage the mind as well as the hands. Now we started to, in talking about learning, the teacher is also coming in here. What is the role of the teacher in the learning process? That it provides activities that engage the mind as well as the hands of the learner. According to this theory, language is important in learning. That the language we use influences learning. And that people talk to themselves as they learn. That language and learning are intertwined. And actually this theory emphasizes the importance of the native language. That learning is a social activity. It is associated or it is connected with other human beings. And who are the other human beings that we connect with in learning? They are our teachers, they are our peer group members, they are family members, and even casual acquaintances are important in learning. According to this theory, learning is contextual. That we do not learn isolated facts and theories in some abstract, ethereal land of the mind, separate from the rest of our lives. Learning is within a context. And that we learn in relationship with what we know. That what we believe is important in learning. Our fears, our prejudices are important. So learning is active and learning is social. Learning is an active process. We said this before. Learning is an active process in which the learner uses sensory inputs and constructs meaning out of it. That learning is not the passive acceptance of knowledge which exists out there. We said that before. That learning involves the learner engaging with the word, that is, people around him as they learn. It consists of people constructing meaning and constructing systems of meaning. So we cannot divorce learning from our lives. That we need knowledge in order to learn. We need experience in order to learn. That it is not possible to assimilate new knowledge without having some structure developed from previous knowledge to build on. I told you it's a literature review, and we are repeating plenty of it. And that is that the more we know, the more we can learn. Our experiences determine the level or how far we can learn. And so, any effort to teach must be connected with the state of the learner. It must provide the learner a path into the subject. So, teacher, subject and learner are integrated. So for learning to take place, we must revisit ideas, which is to say it takes time to learn. We must revisit ideas. We must ponder them. We must try them. We must play with them and use them. The theory of constructivism emphasizes motivation in learning. But their motivation is one that comes from within. That if learners must learn, they must know what the relevance of this new knowledge to them. So, for learners to be motivated to learn, how can they use? They must know how they can use this new knowledge. They must know the reason why they are learning. So, constructivism emphasizes knowledge construction rather than knowledge transmission and the recording of information conveyed by others. So, the issue is not information coming from others. I don't know whether there are three processes. There are three processes by which constructivists construct knowledge. Three processes. The first one is called exogenous construction. The second is called endogenous. The first is exogenous. The second is endogenous construction. And the third is dialectical construction. So far, we have been analyzing the constructivist theory of learning. We looked at how it views knowledge. We've looked at how it views the learner. Are we lost? Are we lost? So where are we lost? Where? Number what? No, this one we have just started now. I'm only introducing the processes. Let me recap so that we are together, we're on the same page. Were we together when we were looking at how constructivists view knowledge? Were we together? Were we also together when we were looking at how they view learning and the learner? Were we together? Okay. So, we are moving ahead to say, according to this theory, there are three ways the learner constructs knowledge. And I've only given you the three ways. I've not analyzed any of them. Number one is what? Number one is exogenous. Number two, endogenous. Number three, dialectical. Are we together? Can we continue? Are you tired? Okay. Did you hear this sort of thing before? Did you? Are you happy hearing it? Can we go and practice it? Okay. So let's go back to an exogenous construction. According to exogenous construction, there is an external reality that is constructed as knowledge is formed. That is that one constructs knowledge from one's mind according to this first process. But the knowledge that the individual constructs reflects the organization of the world. It's called exogenous construction. Then there is endogenous construction, which focuses on internal individual construction of knowledge. Remember the first one, there is a relationship. What the individual constructs in his mind is reflected in the organization of the world. The individual can situate his construction in the environment. That is exogenous construction. For endogenous construction, emphasis is on internal individual construction of knowledge. It emphasizes individual knowledge construction stimulated by internal cognitive conflicts as learners strive to resolve mental equilibrium. Knowledge, the emphasis is on the inside. But it is the environment that provides the conflict that the individual, in order to sort out, creates knowledge. And so, according to this theory, individuals must negotiate the meaning of learning and phenomena that are discrepant from the existing schema. What I have known before does not fit into what I have seen. I must resolve the conflict. We said it before. So in that case, according to this theory, students author their knowledge. I author my knowledge. And this is done by advancing their cognitive structures, by revisiting and creating new understanding out of existing ones. But it also says this construction of knowledge can be achieved either individually or socially. We need others to learn. Then the third is called Dialectical Construction. It is also called social constructivism. It views the origin of knowledge construction as being the social interaction of people. Are we seeing the difference now? The first, I construct knowledge on my own, but it reflects what is in the world around me. The second, I construct knowledge from within me. But what happens, the process of constructing knowledge is that what I have known internally, my experiences, my skills, my concepts, cannot be located in the environment, so there is conflict. So in order to resolve this conflict, I create new knowledge that helps me to understand what is happening. But this third one, knowledge is constructed as a result of social interaction with other people. Interactions of sharing, comparing, and debating among learners and mentors. So it is through this social milieu that learners refine their meanings and help others to learn. Excuse me. So let me rush. So this third theory emphasizes social exchange for knowledge construction. It emphasizes that knowledge is developed in the context of culture, in the context of other people. So let me quickly run through the characteristics, give a summary of this constructivist learning. It's a summary of what it says about knowledge, about the learner. So I'm actually repeating myself. Number one, learners construct their own meaning. The dependence of new learning on students' existing understanding. It emphasizes the critical role of social interaction. There is also the necessity for authentic learning tasks for meaningful learning. There must be authentic tasks. Let me jump some of them. I'm doing a summary, so let me just jump a lot of these things. Learners must build their own understanding. According to this theory, how information is presented is important in learning. That is the method of presentation. This theory emphasizes dialogue as a catalyst for knowledge acquisition. The theory emphasizes interaction, an interaction that is challenging, that offers timely support and feedback. Constructivist theory of learning emphasizes learning communities, people learning in a community. It encourages support for one another through respectful learning and encouragement. It encourages the spirit and culture of openness in learning. Let me quickly, as I try to round up, mention some concepts that are important in constructivist learning. Some concepts that are important in this learning are scaffolding. Scaffolding, providing a structure for somebody. When you are building a high-rise building, you need a structure to stand on and build. That's a scaffold. So that is what the teacher is supposed to do in this theory, be a scaffold provides support for the learner to learn. The teacher is supposed to be like a mentor, providing cognitive apprenticeship. So the learner learns under the teacher. And how does cognitive apprenticeship happen? It is that the master models behavior, and he gives feedback to the learner. Cognitive apprenticeship allows the novice increasing opportunities to independently exercise the skills of the profession. The novice is socialized into the norms and behavior of the profession. So, apprenticeship relationship is what exists between the teacher and the student. Now, let me quickly run to what are the implications for the learner. We'll soon end. In less than 5 minutes, we end. What are the implications for the learner? Students enter classrooms with rich previous experiences. They hold their opinions towards daily life, even universal issues. Even though they do not know some issues and have no experiences, there are some that they know. The learner is coming into the classroom with previous experiences and cognitive abilities. Teaching should take students' previous knowledge and experience as the growth point of new knowledge. And students should be encouraged to generate new knowledge from the former. What are the implications for the teachers? Teachers should design the teaching environment. Teachers should be the guider of students' learning. They should actually be academic consultants to the learner. But that is not to lose the focus that students are at the center of learning with teachers as their guide. And so they organize and guide the whole process. Now the conclusion. Constructivism is the most viable option for us as a country if we want to have scientific breakthroughs, if we want to produce inventors, innovators, and creative youths. Constructivism is the most viable option if we want education to solve our national problems. It is the most viable option if we must shape and sharpen the young. So my prayer is that may the good Lord will and work in us for this purpose. Thank you very much.